And we're so lucky to be joined by Sandy from WCG, who's going to be presenting on revolutionizing ethical oversight and the future of IRB management. So that sounds exciting to you all, I'm sure. I'm just an event planner, so I'm sure you're gonna have a great time. It's all gonna go right over my head, but I know that Sandy is gonna give you all a great presentation. So please join me in welcoming Sandy to the stage.
I hail from Austin, where we're still experiencing some 90-degree temperatures, but I think that'll be short-lived. Well, great to be here today. As Nisha mentioned, I represent WCG, and obviously our history has been deeply rooted in ethical review. You know, one of the founders of a centralized IRB process was Dr. Angela Bowen, who was an endocrinologist and avid researcher, and that was back in 1968, where she developed the Western IRB and really began helping to shape how IRB policy would be put into place and opportunities for expediting reviews without sacrificing what IRBs are meant to do, and that is thoughtful and thorough ethical review. So we'd like to give you a little insight into what we've been doing at WCG. Talk a little bit about current site challenges. Obviously, you've been hearing about that over the past day and a half, and we've just completed our site challenges report, which was published last week. So if you've not seen the latest site challenges report, it's interesting. It follows the theme of what you've been hearing here about complexity of clinical trials. That's ranked #1 for the last 2 years. And I found that particularly interesting because since COVID, site staffing had been #1, but seeing complexity rise to the top and remain there. Obviously, it's an issue we need to work on. We'll also talk a little bit about the evolution of centralized IRB oversight, ClinSphere on our eReview Manager platform, which is in its humble beginnings of being utilized. And then I also wanted to talk about some site enablement solutions, because we all know that while there are many functions that take place prior to getting a trial open, it really is the multiple functions together that lead to measuring accelerated trial activation that's really important. It's not only important to the investigators, but it's so important to the patients who are waiting for those trials. And of course, we always want to give you the option to ask us some questions. So from our site challenges report, and this is specific to technology, 20% of the sites say that sponsor-provided technology is a top issue impacting their sites. 22% of those sites say the number of technologies required on a trial is the #1 factor. So we still have many sites feeling as though they have to go through multiple trainings, they have to be the help desk, and they have to piecemeal it all together in order to successfully implement a trial. And again, this is one of the definitions that's contributing to the complexity of clinical trials. Many things like protocol design, many things like the number of endpoints, whether they are true endpoints or exploratory endpoints, but also technologies weigh in that definition. And then 1/4 of the sites say ethical and regulatory review is one of the largest contributors. And this is a little shocking since, you know, back in 1974, the federal government condoned the use of centralized review processes for those federally funded studies. And so seeing that there still are delays related to ethical review is a little worrisome, because we know we have many other things contributing to delays in activation. So centralized IRB oversight is evolving, and it's great to be at these conferences and talk about technology and to think about, you know, how AI is going to help us. And I'm a believer that it will as well. But if I heard anything as a theme of this conference, is that we still need humans in the workflows for verification. And I think that's incredibly important for us to remember and understand. And ethical oversight, it is about humans. While we can use lots of technology tools to help with processing and packet preparation and making sure we have the right documents to be reviewed, it is still the quality of the review is dependent on the individuals that have been selected to serve this very important function. And I'd say, continuing on the theme of complexity, critically making sure you've got the right people that are sitting on the IRB. You know, I've been in clinical research for a long time. I've helped establish local IRBs back in the day, and they were people who raised their hand as volunteers who had time on their hands, or they were physicians that were nearing retirement and still wanted to make a contribution. And their contributions were valued. But with the type of trials that we have today, look at the combination therapies, radiopharmaceuticals, theranostics, the bi and tri-specific agents. There is so much detail, and now throw in a little bit of technology as well as AI into the protocols. So it's getting more and more complex, and we have to be very cognizant that whoever is reviewing these from a human perspective is well versed in all that is contained in those clinical trials. And one thing I'm very proud about WCG is the fact that we intentionally offer continuing education to all of our IRB board members. They just convened out in Arizona last month, and this is keeping them aware not just of regulatory changes, but also making sure that we have the proper therapeutic and technology expertise on our board so that when those protocols are reviewed, they are being reviewed not only from an ethical perspective, but also understanding the clinical and human implications of these trials. So things are evolving. You know, we at WCG have had technology platforms for submission. We're always trying to raise the bar a bit higher. And so in doing so, we are getting ready to launch our ClinSphere eReview Manager. Now, you may have heard that term ClinSphere before. It is a centralized repository for a lot of our technology. And from a user perspective, it is also meant to be a single sign-on. So if you're accessing multiple technologies from WCG, hopefully we can simplify your access to them with that single sign-on. But eReview Manager is going to replace Connexus. How many of you are users of Connexus? How many of you think we can improve what we currently have? Okay, good. So we're on the right track. So gone will be the paper form that needs to be submitted to add new contacts. I know I've spoken to some folks in the exhibit hall, and there were cries of excitement over that. Also, a lot of auto-populating. So overall, our goal is to try to reduce your submission timeline. Again, this has nothing to do with the ethical review. This is all about making sure document management, completion of the packets, and all of that is getting to the board in a way that the full packet is there, holds don't have to be put in place, and we can increase that throughput. And then along with that, a significant reduction in the document handling time. So we'll dig into those just a little bit deeper. So obviously we want efficiency. We want to make sure that we have the ability to process things in a timely manner. We actually are going to be dropping our turnaround time target to 6 days for a review of a full protocol. And again, I want to say we don't do this by doing shortcuts. If we have to add more boards to our agendas, we will do that to make sure that that scientific integrity and ethical review process remains sound. Also within eReview Manager, there's going to be a collaboration hub. So right now, a lot of communication takes place in email. And while there will be notifications sent to you on email, because we know that you're not staying within this application all the time, you will have the ability to be able to phone a friend within the communication hub. And I think more importantly, if it requires escalation to an SME, that also happens within the collaboration hub. So hopefully that will increase the quality of the review and the quality of the submission, to allow for the quality of the review, but more importantly, cutting down any holds that have to be put in place. The streamlined document management. So we're going to have a lot of history that's stored in a centralized database. So if you have used any information before, it can be recalled, hopefully reducing that redundancy of what you have to type in each and every time. And so all of that will be there. You'll also have the ability to do some bulk downloading. And this can be done by searching by PI, searching by sponsor, of course, looking at different date ranges. So again, I think that that is an enhanced functionality from our current platform. And ease of use. And we have begun putting some sponsors onto eReview Manager. Some of them have been given very limited instructions because we were trying to assess the intuitiveness of accessing the system, and they've done quite well. But rest assured, we're not going to leave you figure it out on your own. There will be lots of opportunities for trainings and different tools and tips to help this be a very seamless process. So as we've looked at what the estimates are for the time spent entering the submission, our estimates at this time are a 23% reduction. And if you were able to say that you can generate some hours in your day, I'm sure you can spend that doing lots and lots of other things. So as I said, smart forms, intuitive workflows, fostering that collaboration within the platform, all of these things contributing to that faster submission timeline, which would then allow us to speed up that processing of documents. And again, I wanted to underscore it's the document management. It is not the review by the board members. The transparency will be there, the real-time visibility, all the access to all the outcome documents. You won't have to be searching emails to find the links to those, but everything will be at your fingertips. So that repository will be there as well. And then the download time. This is where we really think that it's going to have a significant impact on your ability to get more customized reports as well as to speed up that downloading time. So again, we do believe that the way that this has been built, and I do want to mention that this is not an improvement on Connexus. This is an entire rebuild. So we have started from the ground up, which is why it's taken us some time. We want to do it right. We wanted to be sure that when we released it, we had done thorough testing and made sure that we've incorporated that feedback. So we are on several versions since the initial outlay was first designed, and hoping to bring you a really, really good product that will help you as that first step in the trial activation process. So with that, I also want to lead into some work that I've been doing with a lot of cancer centers, academic medical centers, health networks, independent sites, and other types of networks. Huge focus, as there has been, on trial activation. We know IRB is a significant part of that, and as we found from our stats, 25% of sites, some of them are still doing their own IRB reviews. We do believe what the single IRB mandate still looming, that will eventually go and become the way things are done for multi-site trials, so that should expedite things. But we also know that there are many other steps in the trial activation process. So with WCG, we've looked at some of the assets that we've had, and we've linked them together, we've connected them, and working with some of our partners, we are seeing that achievement of the 90 calendar day timeline that the NCI recommends can be achieved. It's interesting, I was on a call recently with a physician who was a former AACI president, and he said, I'd love to write a paper with you on how that 90 calendar day activation isn't going to happen. It's just unrealistic. And I had to say, but sites are doing it. So while the statistics say only 7% of NCI designated cancer centers are actually hitting the 90-day, we are seeing that. Looking at workflows, looking at where you can reduce the white space, which is that handoff between different functions that have to be done, really allow for a reduction in the activation time. But it does take time, it takes focus, and it takes a concerted effort. So I'll talk a little bit about what we've been doing. And again, these numbers are not at all unusual or unknown. An average of 9.4 months for AMCs. We've seen some that take close to a year to actually get their trials activated. And then when you look at independent sites, physician practices, they're still around 5 months. There are very few sites that say we want to go lower. And I will give credit to some sites that are hitting activation timelines in the 60s and 70-day ranges. Some of them are already doing it. The model that we have, it really is quite flexible. We know that there is nothing that is cookie cutter that you can take from one site to another, but what we have done is looked at concurrent workflows. And again, this part is really nothing revolutionary. Many have been doing that. While the IRB and IBC, if needed, workflow is occurring, concurrent to that, we have the financial workflow, and the legal workflow. And while the size of the box doesn't necessarily reflect the turnaround time, we just wanted all of that to kind of end up with the final work, that last mile, which we refer to as the CTMS builds. Now, having been a former SMO leader, I can tell you we struggled a lot with the coverage analysis, and I still hear sponsors say some sites are taking weeks or months to get a coverage analysis completed. We all know the dilemma we have now with budgets even taking longer to negotiate than the contracts. But then that last mile, the CTMS builds, is another lag. So an investigator hears, oh, the contract's been signed, they're ready to enroll a patient onto a clinical trial, only to hear, no, we haven't built it into our CTMS yet. So this is the problem that we are trying to solve, and how can we reduce the white space? How can we get a little bit more nimble? So using Lean and Six Sigma principles, we measure all workflows. As you can see here, we've designated turnaround times for anything where we are designing a work product, a coverage analysis, preparing a budget, redlining a contract. We've set that target at 5 days. And then negotiations, we've set a target at 45 days. But with that, it's not just a negotiation, it's designing an escalation process with a site so that we know if we're early on at day 20 and imaging is a hang-up, we're probably not going to get very far and we don't want to burn another 25 days. So we begin an escalation process. Every one of these services that we provide have customized playbooks by site because we recognize some sites have rules in place or policies in place that are non-negotiable, and we respect those. But we can also share best practices from site to site, and in some cases, all or elements of them will be helpful. So this is all great to talk about, and I looked very much forward to using Six Sigma to measure and to show results. And I'm very happy to say that 2 of the organizations that we've worked with we're highlighting here, but many more working towards these same types of results. For a large health system that we worked with, and I can feel free to name them because we've just recently published a case study with Henry Ford Health. Henry Ford was going through a number of things about 2 years ago where they were trying to centralize their clinical trials office. In addition, they had gone through a reduction in force at the time. They were also trying to increase their trial portfolio, and oh, by the way, they were putting a CTMS into place. And so they knew that they needed help, and they reached out to WCG. Over that period of time, as part of our partnership, and I will say it is a group that we are on the phone with every week, making sure that our workflows and everything is aligned with them, they have gone down to 100 days as an average, so a 50% reduction in their overall trial activation. And I will say as we split out oncology from non-oncology is around 74 days. So it really can be done. But it was a motivated organization who came to the table saying, what is it that we need to do and how can we partner with you effectively to do it? So there's been a great partnership there. The second example that we have here, it is a large academic medical center, and this is specifically an NCI-designated cancer center where they've achieved a 52% reduction. So we have been able to do this. We can't go from 200 or 300 days down to 90 in 6 months. But it is an iterative process, and we have been able to reduce those timeframes in the partnership. It's nothing WCG can do to a site or exclusively for a site, but it really is that shared knowledge and shared vision. So with that, again, we started out talking about ethical review, how technology is being used, how smart forms are being used, how AI will be integrated into many of these workflows. But at the heart of many of these workflows, it's the people that are still important to make sure that we are not only verifying, but we're also looking for where those additional opportunities are. So with that, I will conclude my comments and see if you have any questions. How many of you in the room are 100 days or less in your activation process? Oh, good for you, rock on.
Hello, I think that depends on the study, right? Sometimes we can do it, sometimes don't. So just one question regarding document management.
Yes.
Is there a plan to integrate WCG downloads with Florence e-binders?
Oh, I am so glad you asked that. Seeing Ryan here up front, I mean, the leadership at Florence has been so welcoming to WC and trying to connect systems. We actually had a plan to do that. We announced it here some time ago. And then because we knew we would be retiring Connexus, we didn't really want to invest in building in a technology that was going to be retired. But it is our objective that once we have eReview Manager up and running, that we will connect the systems and it will be a bi-directional workflow. So you've heard the swivel chair effect, you know, downloading and uploading. We want to avoid that.
Other questions? Got one in the back.
What's the timeline you're looking at retiring of Connexus to implementing the new version?
Yeah, I don't have an absolute date for you. Obviously, we're going to do it when we have been able to migrate everyone over. And again, we have a very long history at WCG for IRB review. So we have already begun moving some sponsors onto the platform. There are goals to be achieved that we will likely be several hundred of them on in the next few weeks. And then our sites will be getting to onboard in 2026. So I can't tell you with certainty because a lot of this is an iterative process as well. And we want to make it right. There's a lot at stake here and we don't want to disappoint.
Hi, quick question. I walked in a few minutes late, sorry, so you might have gone over this, but can you give a little background on the survey data from sites, how that's collected, and is it publicly available?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've pushed it out on LinkedIn, but you can go to the WCG website and download the report. There's no fee associated with it. It is an annual survey. I would say it was more informal in 2020 and 2021, but we formalized it the last few years. It is a global survey, so you will see information that breaks out US data from global data, and there's a very nice representation of different regions of the world. There are over 600 respondents to the survey. And as I mentioned earlier, you know, staffing was the #1 concern for a long time. I know a lot of sites responded by creating training programs to bring in folks that were more junior in their career. So we slowly saw that drop to 4th last year. I was really eager to see the results this year because of all of the tumult that occurred with federal funding, a lot of belt tightening that's going on at hospitals and research organizations. And in fact, it did notch back up that staffing was the #3 concern. Always in the top 4 is recruitment and retention as well as study startup. So the top 3 this year, trial complexity, study startup, and then staffing.
Any other questions? We got time for a couple more. Sure.
This is a more speculative question.
Sure.
But with some of the challenges that we've seen in staffing shortages, limited PI across the nation, et cetera, what do you see from an IRB perspective that are concerning? Do you think there will be more compliance issues associated with how research is conducted despite sites' best efforts? Or what are you seeing on the horizon as impacting some of the very real realities we've experienced over the last few years?
Oh boy, that's the crystal ball question, isn't it, Chad? I mean, I think as long as we are very intentional on training people that we bring in, whether they are coming in on a temporary basis or permanent staff, that we have good workflows identified. You know, I'm always amazed that there are still sites I go to that they have no idea what their activation timeline is, much less having anything written down in terms of workflows. And then when you start talking about preferences or requirements for playbooks, somebody has it in their head, but that is not common knowledge among the team. So I guess I tend to be a little bit more prevention oriented. What can we do intentionally and how do we do it by putting it in place in advance so that we're not seeing the repercussions? And again, I think the complexity of trials is one that we've even had sponsors that we've interacted with that are coming to us saying, can you guys do a coverage analysis because we're not quite sure how to even build the budget. We've never done a trial that involves radiation therapy before. We don't know where to start. So as we see these multimodality trials, there's a lot that sponsors are learning along the way. And let's face it, we expected about 2/3 of the trials this year to come from small and mid-sized biopharma, which generally are organizations with less infrastructure. So they need more of that guidance. So I think as long as we kind of anticipate where the problems are, try our best efforts to mitigate those, that's better than me trying to project where I see the problems will be. I know our chief medical officer, Dr. Donna Snyder, who came to us from the FDA, she's been participating with the MRCT out of Massachusetts to be dealing with how AI is going to be considered in ethical review. So trying to stay on the cutting edge of all of that and discussing it up front and having guidelines in place that can be shared with sites. That's where I think we need to be, is anticipating.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Please join me in thanking Sandy with WCG for the presentation.
Thank you.